In a world where fate intertwines through the innocence of children, two small acts of kindness would shatter the boundaries between outcast and royalty. The marketplace fell silent as the Alpha King's convoy rolled through the dirt streets of the border territories. Mothers grabbed their children. Vendors abandoned their stalls. But in a small cottage on the edge of the Forbidden Woods, an Omega named Katharina had no idea that her life, and the lives of her twin, would be forever changed by a single shared sandwich. This is the story of how two 6-year-old children fed a starving wolf pup in the forest, not knowing he was the Alpha King's lost son. And when Thaddeus Silver Round, the most powerful and ruthless Alpha in 5 kingdoms, came to their door that moonless night, he brought with him a claim that would devastate and transform everything. What happens when the powerful discover that the powerless possess something they desperately need? What price will an Omega pay when the Alpha King demands the impossible? Stay until the end to discover the shocking twist that no one saw coming. The border territories weren't a place, they were a punishment. Tucked between the prosperous Silver Crown Kingdom and the wild, untamed forests that even Alphas feared to enter, this forgotten strip of land housed the rejected, the rogue, and the broken. Omegas without packs. Betas without purpose. Families without protection. Here, the laws of the Great Packs didn't apply. Here, survival was the only rule. Katharina had made this desolate place her sanctuary for 6 years, ever since she'd fled her previous pack with nothing but the twin pups growing in her belly and terror snapping at her heels. She'd built a life from scraps and determination, raising her children Lysander and Talia in a cottage that leaked when it rained and froze when winter came. But she'd given them something more valuable than comfort. She'd given them kindness, compassion. The belief that even in a world designed to crush the weak, goodness still mattered. She never imagined that these very qualities would attract the attention of the one wolf she should fear most. The Alpha King was coming, and he would take everything. But before we dive in, I need to ask you something that truly matters to me. If you've enjoyed my stories before, or if you're here hoping this one will move you, please don't leave without subscribing. Without your subscription, YouTube buries everything I create. The people searching for stories that make them feel something, stories about resilience, love, impossible choices, they'll never find them. Because the algorithm decided I wasn't worth showing. I'm not asking for money. Just 30 seconds to hit that subscribe button so others can discover these stories too. I pour everything I have into every word, every character, every chapter. And knowing I could reach someone who desperately needs it but won't because you didn't click, that genuinely breaks my heart. Please subscribe. It costs you nothing, but to me, it means someone believes these stories matter. Now, let's continue. The autumn sun filtered through the crimson leaves as Lysander and Talia made their way to their secret spot, a small clearing beside the creek where the forest met the meadow. At 6 years old, the twins were inseparable, two halves of the same soul wrapped in different packaging. Lysander, with his storm gray eyes and serious expression, always carried their lunch basket. Talia, wild-haired and laughing, always ran ahead, her bright spirit undimmed by their poverty. Lie, come quickly. Talia's voice rang out with urgency that made her brother's heart lurch. He crashed through the underbrush to find his sister crouched near a hollowed log, her small hand extended towards something hidden in the shadows. Talia, step back, Lysander commanded with the protective authority that came naturally despite his young age. Mama said never to approach strange wolves. But he's hurt, Talia whispered, tears already streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. And he's so small, Look. Lysander peered into the hollow and his breath caught. A wolf pup, no more than 7 or 8 years old in human terms, lay curled in the darkness, his silver-black fur matted with blood and dirt. One of his legs bent at an unnatural angle. His breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. But it was his eyes that struck Lysander silent. Golden. Pure molten gold, like coins in sunlight, like honey and flame. Even clouded with pain and fever, those eyes held something ancient, something powerful, something that whispered of destiny. "We can't leave him," Talia declared, her small jaw set with stubborn determination. "We won't." Lysander knew his sister was right, even as every instinct warned him that this was no ordinary pup. The child's scent was strange, buried under the smell of blood, and infection was something else. Something that made Lysander's wolf, still dormant and years away from emerging, stir restlessly. Royalty. Power. Danger. But louder than instinct was the voice of their mother, Katharina, who had taught them that strength without compassion was merely cruelty. "Okay," Lysander agreed softly, already unpacking their meager lunch. "But we do this carefully. Injured wolves can bite." The feral pup's eyes tracked their movements with wary intelligence as Lysander slowly extended a piece of bread smeared with the precious honey their mother saved for special occasions. "We're friends," Talia cooed gently. "We won't hurt you. Promise." For a long moment, the pup didn't move. Then, with agonizing slowness, he stretched his neck forward and took the bread from Lysander's hand, his golden eyes never leaving the twins' faces. "What's your name?" Talia asked, settling cross-legged in the dirt without fear. "I'm Talia. That's my brother, Lysander. We live in the cottage by the edge of the village." The pup swallowed the bread, then spoke in a voice raw and broken from disuse. "Andreas." The name hung in the air like a bell's toll. Lysander's eyes widened. Andreas. He knew that name. Everyone in the territories knew that name. 3 months ago, the Alpha King's youngest son had vanished during a hunting expedition near the border forests. The search had been massive, brutal. Dozens of rogues had been captured and tortured for information. Villages had been burned on mere suspicion of harboring the lost prince. And here he was, broken and bleeding, in a hollow log not 50 yards from their home. "We have to tell Mama," Lysander whispered to his sister, his heart hammering against his ribs. But Talia had already scooted closer to Andreas, offering him their water skin with a gentle smile. "Don't worry. We'll take care of you. That's what friends do." Andreas stared at the little Omega girl who showed no fear, no calculation, no desire for reward. Just pure, uncomplicated kindness. Something cracked in his chest, something that had frozen solid during 3 months of surviving alone in the merciless forest. "Thank you," he whispered and began to cry. The twins spent the next 2 hours with Andreas. They cleaned his wounds with water from the creek. They fed him every scrap of their lunch, ignoring their own growing hunger. Talia sang him the songs Katharina sang when they couldn't sleep, her voice sweet and slightly off-key. Lysander fashioned a splint from sticks and strips torn from his own shirt, his young face grave with concentration as he worked. "This will hurt," he warned Andreas gently. "But it'll help your leg heal straight." Andreas nodded, biting down on a leather strap as Lysander set the bone with surprising skill for a child. The young prince didn't cry out, though sweat beaded on his forehead and his body trembled. "You're very brave," Talia declared, wiping his face with her sleeve. "The bravest pup I ever met." "Why are you helping me?" Andreas asked when he could speak again. "You don't know me. I could be dangerous." "Mama says everyone deserves kindness," Lysander replied simply. "Especially when they're hurt and alone." As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the twins knew they had to leave. Their mother would worry. "We'll come back tomorrow," Talia promised, tucking her small jacket around Andreas's shivering form. "With more food and medicine. Mama has herbs that help with pain." "Don't tell anyone I'm here," Andreas pleaded, fear flashing in his golden eyes. "Please. Bad wolves are looking for me. Wolves who hurt me and left me in the forest to die." Lysander's jaw clenched. "We won't tell anyone except Mama. She'll know what to do. She always does." As the twins disappeared through the trees, Andreas watched them go, his heart a confusion of gratitude, hope, and bone-deep terror. He'd been betrayed by his own father's beta, left for dead as part of a conspiracy he was too young to understand. For 3 months, he'd trusted no one, survived on instinct and desperation. But these children, these beautiful, kind, fearless Omega children, had fed him, cared for him, treated him not as a prince or a prize, but as a person who mattered. He would remember this. And so would his father. Katharina knew something was wrong the moment her children walked through the door. They were too quiet, too serious. And Lysander's shirt was missing strips of fabric, the edges torn hastily and uneven. "Kitchen. Now," she said softly, setting down the herbs she'd been grinding for Mrs. Philomena's arthritis tonic. The twins exchanged glances, that silent communication that had unnerved and delighted Katharina since they were infants, then followed her to the small kitchen table. Katharina studied her children with eyes that missed nothing. At 26, she was young for a mother of 6-year-olds, but the hardships of Omega life had carved premature lines around her eyes and threaded silver through her dark auburn hair. She'd been beautiful once. Before fear. Before running. Before learning that in this world, beauty could be a curse for an unmated Omega. "Tell me," she said simply. And they did. Katharina's face grew paler with each word, her hands trembling as the full weight of their discovery settled over her like a burial shroud. Andreas Silvercrown, the lost prince, hidden 50 yards from her cottage. "Sweet goddess," she breathed, pressing her fingers to her temples. "Do you understand what you've done? What danger you've brought to our door?" "We couldn't leave him, Mama," Talia insisted, tears welling in her large hazel eyes. "He was dying. You always said." "I know what I said." Katharina's voice cracked, sharper than she intended. She immediately softened, reaching for her daughter's hand. "I know, my love. You did exactly what I taught you to do. You showed compassion. But this..." She stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. Alpha King Thaddeus Silvercrown was legendary, and not in ways that inspired comfort. Powerful beyond measure. Ruthless with his enemies. Protective of his bloodline to the point of obsession. When Andreas had vanished, the king's rage had been apocalyptic. Entire rogue camps had been decimated. The border territories had lived in terror for weeks, expecting the king's forces to burn everything in their search. And now his son was here, injured and hidden, and her children had discovered him. "If we tell the authorities, they'll take him," Lysander said quietly, his storm-gray eyes too ancient for his young face. "And they'll want a reward. People will come. Bad people. Like the ones who hurt Andreas in the first place." Katharina's heart clenched. Her son was right. In the border territories, information was currency, and everyone was desperate. If word spread that Andreas Silvercrown was here, this place would become a battlefield. "If we don't tell anyone, and he's discovered, they'll think we kidnapped him," Katharina countered, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. "The punishment for harming or even hiding royal blood is death. Not just for me. For both of you." The kitchen fell silent except for the crackling of the small fire in the hearth. "What if we helped him ourselves?" Talia suggested tentatively. "Just until he's strong enough to go home on his own?" Katharina closed her eyes. Every rational bone in her body screamed that this was madness. That the smart choice was to report Andreas's location immediately, collect whatever small reward might be offered to an Omega, and pray the Alpha King's gratitude outweighed his suspicion. But she'd spent 6 years teaching her children that the world didn't have to be cruel. That even the powerless could choose kindness. How could she punish them for listening? "Show me," she finally said. "Take me to him." The sun had nearly set when Katharina knelt beside the hollow log, her healer's eyes cataloging Andreas's injuries with growing concern. The broken leg was serious but manageable. The gashes across his ribs were infected but treatable. It was the trauma in his eyes that worried her most. This child had been betrayed, abandoned, left to die by wolves who should have protected him. Andreas, she said gently, I'm Katharina, Lysander and Talia's mother. I'm a healer. Will you let me help you? Those golden eyes, so much like his father's, she realized with a jolt, studied her with wariness born of brutal experience. Why? He whispered. Why would you help me? Everyone wants something. Katharina's heart broke. 6 years old and already so cynical. Already so certain of humanity's darkness. Because you're a child who's hurt, she replied simply. And that's enough. She spent the next hour working in the fading light, cleaning wounds, applying poultices made from herbs grown in her small garden, resetting the leg with proper splints. Andreas bore it all with a prince's stoic courage, though tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. Talia held his hand throughout, telling him rambling stories about the chickens in their yard and the cranky goat named Penelope, who ate everything. Her cheerful chatter seemed to anchor Andreas, giving him something to focus on beyond the pain. You can't stay here, Katharina finally declared, sitting back on her heels. It's not safe. Not warm enough. The infection will worsen. The cottage, Lysander suggested. Too dangerous. If someone sees him. The root cellar, Lysander interrupted, his face brightening. The hidden one. Under the false floor in the pantry. The one you showed us for emergencies. Katharina's breath caught. The root cellar. She discovered it shortly after moving into the cottage, a remnant from the old wars, when humans had hidden from supernatural predators. It was small but dry, accessible only through a concealed trapdoor. Hidden. Safe. Warm enough with blankets. It would work, she admitted reluctantly. But Andreas, you'd have to stay quiet during the day. Completely silent. I have patients who visit. Neighbors who borrow supplies. If anyone discovered you. I can be quiet, Andreas promised fervently. I've been hiding for 3 months. I know how to disappear. The casual way he said it, the accepted trauma in a 6-year-old's voice, made Katharina want to weep. Then we move you tonight, she decided. Under cover of darkness. Can you walk? Andreas tried to stand and immediately crumpled, biting back a cry of pain. I'll carry him, Mama, Lysander offered, though he was barely bigger than Andreas himself. In the end, Katharina fashioned a sling from her shawl and carried the young prince herself, his slight weight barely a burden for a wolf shifter, even in Omega. The twins ran ahead, checking that the path was clear, their small faces grave with purpose. As they settled Andreas into the root cellar, piling him with blankets, leaving water and food, promising to return at first light, Katharina felt the weight of her choice settling over her shoulders. She was harboring the Alpha King's son. She was defying the natural order that said Omegas obeyed, always, without question. She was risking everything, her life, her freedom, her children's safety. But as Andreas looked up at her with desperate gratitude, as her twins fussed over their new friend with pure and uncomplicated love, Katharina knew she would make the same choice again. Thank you, Andreas whispered. When my father finds me, and he will find me, I'll tell him what you did. I'll make sure he rewards you. Protects you. Katharina smiled sadly, tucking the blanket around his chin. Sleep, little one. Heal. That's all the reward I need. But as she climbed the ladder and sealed the trapdoor, she whispered a prayer to the moon goddess. Because she knew the truth that Andreas, in his innocence, didn't understand. Alpha King Thaddeus Silvercrown didn't reward Omegas. He owned them. 300 miles north, in the obsidian towers of Silvercrown Castle, Alpha King Thaddeus stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his war room, his massive frame silhouetted against the moonlight. At 34, he was in his prime, 6 feet 5 inches of pure predatory power, with black hair that brushed his shoulders and eyes like molten gold. Scars decorated his chest and arms, each one a story of battles won, challenges defeated, enemies destroyed. He was the most powerful alpha in the known territories. Kings bowed to him. Armies feared him. And he couldn't find his own son. 3 months, he said softly, his voice a dangerous rumble that made every wolf in the room suppress a shiver. 92 days since my Andreas vanished. And you bring me nothing? His beta, Erasmus, a grizzled warrior with silver threading through his black hair, stepped forward carefully. My king, we've searched every territory within 500 miles. We've questioned thousands of wolves. We've offered rewards that could buy kingdoms. And yet my son remains missing. Thaddeus turned, and the rage in his golden eyes made even Erasmus, who'd fought beside him for 15 years, step back. Which means either he's dead, or someone is hiding him. And if they're hiding him, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room understood that whoever had taken Andreas would suffer deaths that would echo through pack history as warnings. The border territories, Thaddeus continued, moving to the massive map spread across the oak table. We've barely touched them. Explain. Erasmus shifted uncomfortably. They're chaotic, my king. No formal pack structure. Mostly rogues, unmated omegas, outcasts. Our investigators report that the wolves there scatter like roaches when our forces approach. They hide information, protect each other out of shared distrust of authority. Then we don't ask, Thaddeus said coldly. We take. Assemble a convoy. 50 of our best warriors. We leave at dawn, and we don't return until we've turned over every stone in those forsaken territories. My king, Erasmus ventured carefully, if we come in with force, they'll hide anything they know even deeper. Perhaps a subtler approach. My 6-year-old son has been missing for 3 months. Thaddeus's roar shook the windows, his alpha power flooding the room like a physical force. Wolves dropped to their knees, heads bowed, throats bared in automatic submission. Only Erasmus remained standing, though his head lowered respectfully. Forgive me, my king, he murmured. I only meant. I know what you meant. Thaddeus's voice dropped, becoming even more dangerous in its quietness. But subtlety has failed. Patience has failed. Now we try my way. He turned back to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Andreas had been his surprise blessing, born to Thaddeus's late mate Lyra 6 years ago, the youngest of 3 sons. While his older brothers Damon and Nikolaus, aged 13 and 11, had inherited their father's warrior spirit and dominant personalities, Andreas had been different. Gentle, thoughtful, more interested in books than battles, more concerned with fairness than power. Lyra had adored him especially for those very differences. And then she died, a sudden illness that had taken her in less than a week, leaving Thaddeus with 3 sons and a hole in his chest that nothing could fill. He'd thrown himself into ruling, into expanding his kingdom, into becoming the most powerful alpha in living memory. He'd been away on a diplomatic mission when Andreas vanished during what should have been a routine hunting trip with the pack's juveniles. When Thaddeus had returned to find his youngest son missing, vanished without a trace, the supervising adults dead, and no witnesses, something inside him had broken. He'd failed Lyra. Failed to protect the child she'd loved most. And every day that Andreas remained missing, that failure carved deeper into his soul. There's something else, my king, Erasmus said quietly. The investigators found evidence that Andreas's disappearance wasn't an accident. The wolves who were guarding him weren't killed by rogues. They were killed by someone who knew their patrol patterns, their weaknesses. Thaddeus went very still. You're saying? I'm saying it was an inside job. Someone in our own pack betrayed you. Took Andreas. Maybe killed him. Maybe sold him. But definitely wanted him gone. The rage that flooded through Thaddeus was white-hot and absolute. His claws extended involuntarily, scoring deep grooves in the windowsill. "Find them," he whispered, his voice deadly calm. "Find whoever betrayed my son, and bring them to me alive. I want them to beg for death long before I grant it." "Yes, my king." As Erasmus departed to make preparations, Thaddeus remained at the window, staring out at the moonlit kingdom that was his domain. Somewhere out there, his son was either dead or suffering, and Thaddeus would burn the world to ash to bring him home. That same night, in the root cellar beneath Katharina's cottage, Andreas woke from a nightmare, his small body drenched in sweat. He dreamed of that terrible day of Beta Cronus, Erasmus's younger brother, assigned to guard the young princes, turning on him with eyes gone cold and calculating. "Nothing personal, little prince. But your father has enemies who pay well. And you're the weakest link. The one no one will miss as much." Andreas had run, his 6-year-old legs pumping desperately through the forest. He'd heard Cronus killing the other guards who'd tried to protect him. Heard their screams cutting off mid-cry. He'd run until he'd fallen tumbling down a ravine, breaking his leg, crawling into the hollow log where Lysander and Talia would eventually find him 3 months later. He'd hidden. Survived. Barely. And he'd been too terrified to reveal himself, even when search parties had passed nearby. Because what if Cronus had convinced everyone that Andreas had been killed by rogues? What if going home meant walking into a trap? Now, in the darkness of the cellar, Andreas heard soft footsteps above. He tensed, terror spiking through his small frame. Then the trapdoor opened, and Talia's face appeared, illuminated by candlelight, her expression concerned. "Bad dreams?" she whispered. Andreas nodded, not trusting his voice. Talia climbed down the ladder, her nightgown billowing around her thin legs. She settled beside him in the blanket nest, her small hand finding his. "Mama says bad dreams can't hurt you," she offered softly. "They're just your brain trying to make sense of scary things. The dreams aren't real. But we are. And we won't let anyone hurt you." "You can't promise that," Andreas whispered. "The wolves who want me dead are powerful. They'll come eventually." "Then we'll hide you better," Talia declared with the absolute conviction of childhood. "We're very good at hiding, aren't we, Ly?" Andreas hadn't even noticed Lysander climbing down until the boy appeared with a small bundle. "Brought you tea," Lysander said, offering a warm cup. "Mama's special blend. Helps with nightmares and pain." As Andreas sipped the soothing tea, tasting chamomile and something else he couldn't identify, the twins settled on either side of him like bookends. "Want to hear about the time Penelope the goat ate Mr. Artemis's entire vegetable garden?" Talia asked, her eyes dancing with mischief. And despite everything, despite the terror and trauma, despite the broken leg and uncertain future, Andreas found himself smiling. These Omega children had given him something his royal life had never provided: uncomplicated friendship. Kindness without agenda. Love without condition. He would remember this. And when his father finally found him, because Thaddeus Silverround always found what he sought, Andreas would make sure these children were protected, no matter what it cost. Time in the border territories moved differently, measured not in hours, but in survival, not in days, but in endurance. 5 weeks passed since the twins had found Andreas in the forest. 5 weeks of Katharina living with her heart in her throat, certain that each knock on her door would be the Alpha King's warriors coming to drag them all to execution. 5 weeks of Andreas healing in the root cellar, his leg mending straight and strong under Katharina's expert care, his nightmares gradually lessening as the twins' constant companionship worked magic that medicine couldn't. 5 weeks of building something fragile and precious, a makeshift family born of necessity and nurtured by genuine affection. Andreas thrived under the twins' attention. The hollow-eyed, traumatized pup who'd barely spoken had transformed into a bright, laughing child who taught Lysander complex strategy games and helped Talia create elaborate stories about brave knights and clever witches. In return, the twins taught him things no royal tutors had bothered with: how to darn socks, how to identify edible plants in the forest, how to make music from nothing but sticks and pots. And Katharina, she watched this wounded prince bloom in her children's care and felt her protective instincts surge with dangerous intensity. He was theirs now. Not a prince. Not a political asset. Just Andreas, who cried when Talia sang him lullabies and who looked at Lysander like an older brother he'd always wanted. She knew she was being foolish. Knew she was bonding with a child she could never keep. But she'd built a life on foolish hope. Why stop now? Mama, Andreas can shift. Talia burst into the kitchen one afternoon, her face flushed with excitement. Katharina's heart stopped. What? Just his ears and tail so far, Lysander explained, following his sister with Andreas limping behind on his nearly healed leg. But look. Andreas concentrated, his young face scrunching with effort. Slowly, magnificently, silver-black wolf ears emerged from his golden hair and a fluffy tail sprouted behind him. It was adorable and terrifying in equal measure. Because partial shifting before puberty was rare, a sign of exceptional power and royal bloodlines. It was also highly visible evidence of exactly who Andreas was. That's wonderful, Katharina managed, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. But Andreas, you must promise me you'll only shift down here. Never where anyone might see. I know, Andreas said solemnly, his ears drooping slightly. I'm being careful. I promise. As the children scampered back to the cellar to practice more shifting, Katharina leaned against the kitchen counter, her hands trembling. 5 weeks. They'd had 5 peaceful weeks. It couldn't last. The knock came 2 days later, just after dawn. Katharina froze in the middle of grinding herbs, her enhanced hearing picking up the multiple heartbeats outside her cottage. 5 wolves. Maybe 6. Not neighbors. Not patients. Warriors. Cellar, she mouthed to the twins, who'd been setting the table for breakfast. Now. Silent. Lysander and Talia vanished like smoke, well-practiced in the emergency drills Katharina had been running since Andreas's arrival. Katharina smoothed her worn dress, tucked her auburn hair behind her ears, and opened the door wearing her most submissive Omega expression. 5 wolves stood on her doorstep, all wearing the silver and black of the Silver Crown Guard. The leader, a female alpha with a scar bisecting her left eyebrow, studied Katharina with sharp amber eyes. Omega, the warrior said, not unkindly. I am Cassandra, captain of the Alpha King's search division. We're conducting inquiries regarding the missing prince, Andreas Silverround. May we enter? It wasn't really a question. Of course, Katharina murmured, lowering her eyes and stepping aside. Though I don't know how I could help. I'm just a healer. I don't involve myself in pack politics. Cassandra and her team entered, their eyes cataloging everything with professional efficiency. The sparse furniture. The dried herbs hanging from the rafters. The single bedroom door. You live alone? Cassandra asked. With my twin children. They're 6. Currently, playing outside. A lie. The first of many she'd have to tell. The Alpha King is searching every residence in the border territories, Cassandra explained, her team already spreading through the cottage, checking corners, peering under the bed. 3 months ago, his youngest son vanished. We have intelligence suggesting he may have fled to or been taken to this region. I heard about the disappearance, Katharina said carefully. Terrible tragedy. But I've seen no strange pups. Just the usual border territory wolves. Rogues and outcasts mostly. Cassandra's eyes sharpened. You're an unmated Omega with young children. Living alone in one of the most dangerous territories. That's unusual. I prefer dangerous freedom to safe slavery, Katharina replied quietly, then immediately regretted the flash of defiance. But Cassandra's lips twitched in what might have been approval. Fair enough. Still, I'll need to search the entire property, including outbuildings, root cellars, anywhere a frightened pup might hide. Katharina's blood turned to ice. Of course, she heard herself say. Though I should warn you, the root cellar floods frequently. It's mostly unusable, full of mud and rotting wood. Another lie. Easier this time. Cassandra nodded to one of her team, a massive beta male who immediately headed for the pantry where the trapdoor was hidden. This was it. The moment everything ended. Katharina's mind raced through impossible scenarios. Could she fight? 5 trained warriors against 1 Omega? Suicide. Could she run? Grab the children and flee into the forest? They'd be hunted down in hours. The beta reached the pantry, began examining the floorboards. His hand hovered over the concealed trapdoor. And then, Captain, one of the other warriors called from outside. We've got movement in the forest. Multiple wolves. Could be the rogues we were warned about. Cassandra's head snapped up. Defensive positions. Omega, stay inside. The warriors flooded out of the cottage, hands on weapons, instantly shifting focus to the potential threat. Katharina stood frozen, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Through the window, she watched the warriors fan out, investigating the tree-lean where nothing appeared to be happening. False alarm? Mistake? Or miracle? 20 minutes later, Cassandra returned, her expression frustrated. Deer. Just a herd of deer. My apologies for the disruption. No apology needed, Katharina managed. You're doing your duty. Protecting the king's son. Cassandra studied her for a long moment, and Katharina had the unsettling feeling that this warrior saw far more than she pretended. If you do see anything suspicious, Cassandra finally said, there's a substantial reward for information leading to the prince's recovery. Enough to buy you and your children a much better life than this. She gestured around the shabby cottage, the implied insult clear. I'll remember that, Katharina lied smoothly. Thank you. As the warriors departed, Katharina watched through the window until they disappeared down the road. Then she counted to 100. Then to 100 again. Only when she was certain they were truly gone did she open the trapdoor. 3 pairs of eyes stared up at her from the darkness, her twins flanking Andreas, all 3 children silent as graves. They're gone, she whispered. The deer, Lysander said quietly. That was you, wasn't it, Mama? You sent them. I felt you use your gift. Katharina's shoulders sagged. Her secret, the one she'd hidden for 6 years, the reason she'd fled her original pack. She wasn't just an Omega. She was a nature-touched Omega, capable of communicating with animals, of calling them, commanding them when necessary. It was a rare gift. A dangerous gift. Because powerful alphas collected rare Omegas like precious objects, breeding them for their gifts, enslaving them for their power. Yes, she admitted. I called the deer. Created a distraction. You saved us, Andreas breathed, his golden eyes wide. You saved me. Again. We're running out of luck, Katharina said grimly. That was too close. If they come back, if they bring specialists who can detect lies, or scent trackers who can find hidden spaces, then we'll run, Lysander declared, his young voice firm. All of us. Together. Run where? Katharina asked helplessly. Andreas, your father is searching everywhere. There's nowhere we could hide you that he won't eventually look. Then maybe I should go home, Andreas said quietly, pain flickering across his face. Maybe I should stop putting you in danger. No. Talia threw her arms around him fiercely. You can't. What about Cronus? What if he tries to hurt you again? Andreas's expression shuddered. Then at least you'll be safe. Katharina knelt before the 3 children, gathering them close. No one is going anywhere. Not yet. But we need to be smarter. More careful. And Andreas, soon, you're going to have to make a choice. What choice? He whispered. Whether you trust your father enough to tell him the truth about what happened. Because sooner or later, he's going to find you. And when he does, the story you tell will determine whether we're seen as heroes or kidnappers. The weight of that truth settled over the cellar like a burial shroud. The convoy arrived on a moonless night, exactly 5 weeks and 3 days after the twins had found Andreas. Thaddeus Silverround stood in the central square of the largest border territory settlement, a collection of ramshackle buildings that barely qualified as a village, and surveyed his surroundings with barely concealed disgust. This was where his son had been for 3 months? In this poverty-stricken wasteland? If Andreas was even here at all. My king, Erasmus approached quietly. We've secured the perimeter. No one enters or leaves without our knowledge. How many residences? 47 in the main settlement. Another 100 or so scattered within a 5-mile radius. Mostly Omegas, some Beta families, a handful of rogue Alphas. We search them all, Thaddeus commanded. Tonight. I want every cellar opened, every attic searched, every wolf questioned. No exceptions. My king, if we're too aggressive, they'll resist. Perhaps. They'll resist anyway. Thaddeus cut him off. These are border wolves. They trust no authority, respect no laws. We don't ask permission. We take what we need. Erasmus nodded, though unease flickered in his eyes. And if we find evidence that someone has been hiding the prince? Then they'll wish they'd never been born. Thaddeus's voice was cold, absolute. The voice of a king who'd been pushed to the edge of his endurance. He'd spent 3 months searching, grieving, imagining his youngest son's fate. 3 months of nightmares where Andreas called for him and he couldn't answer. Tonight, that ended. One way or another. He would find Andreas, or he would find his body. And the wolves responsible would learn why you didn't cross the Silver Crown bloodline. In her cottage, Katharina bolted upright in bed, her Omega senses screaming danger. Multiple Alphas. Dozens of them. Flooding through the settlement with the coordinated precision of a military operation. And leading them a presence so powerful it made her wolf want to bare its throat in submission even from a distance. The Alpha King. He was here. Katharina's hands shook as she threw on her robe and ran to wake the children. Lysander, Talia, get up. Now. Quickly. The twins woke instantly, well trained in emergency protocols. Warriors? Lysander asked, his face pale in the candlelight. Worse. The Alpha King himself. We have maybe 20 minutes before they reach this cottage. Katharina's mind raced. Options. She needed options. They could run, flee into the forest with Andreas, and hope to disappear before the search net closed. But the king would have trackers. Sent hounds. They'd be caught before dawn. They could hide Andreas better, perhaps in the forest hollow where he'd originally been found? But if he was discovered alone, injured, with no witnesses to corroborate his story about Cronus's betrayal. Or they could do the unthinkable. Wake Andreas, Katharina said quietly, decision crystallizing. We're turning ourselves in. Mama, no. Talia gasped. Listen to me, Katharina gripped her daughter's shoulders. The king is searching every home. He will find the cellar. He will find Andreas. And if he finds us hiding a royal prince in a concealed room, looking like kidnappers, we're dead. But if we go to him first. Lysander's eyes widened with understanding. If we go to him first, we control the story. We tell him what happened. We prove we were helping, not hiding. We pray that Andreas vouches for us. He will. Andreas's voice came from the cellar entrance. He'd climbed up on his own, his leg nearly fully healed now. My father can be intense. Scary, even. But he's fair. And he loves me. If I tell him you saved my life, he'll reward you. I know he will. Katharina wished she had Andreas's faith in Alpha justice. But she lived as an Omega in a world ruled by Alpha whims. She knew that fairness was a luxury afforded to the powerful, not the weak. Still, it was their best chance. Their only chance. Then we go together, she declared. Right now. Before they come to us. She dressed the children in their best clothes, which weren't much, but at least they were clean. She braided Talia's wild hair. She made them all wash their faces and hands. If they were going to present themselves to the Alpha King, they would do it with dignity. As they stepped out into the moonless night, Katharina took Andreas's hand. When we see your father, you tell him exactly what happened. The truth. About Cronus. About the attack. About how Lysander and Talia found you. About how we helped. Can you do that? Andreas nodded, his golden eyes solemn. I can. I will. I promise. They made their way toward the village square, where lights blazed and voices echoed, the sounds of homes being searched, wolves being questioned. Katharina's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect her children, to flee from the dangerous predator who ruled these lands. But she held her head high and kept walking. Because sometimes, the bravest thing an Omega could do was stand still. They were 50 yards from the square when a massive shape materialized from the shadows, blocking their path. Katharina's breath caught. Alpha King Thaddeus Silvercrown stood before them, backlit by the square's torches, his enormous frame radiating power that made the air feel thick and heavy. He was even more terrifying in person than rumor suggested. 6.5 feet of pure dominant alpha, with eyes like molten gold that could strip secrets from souls. Dressed in black battle leathers that emphasized the warrior's body beneath. Power rolled off him in waves, making Katharina's Omega instincts scream at her to submit, to kneel, to bare her throat. But before she could move, before she could speak, Papa! Andreas broke away from her grip and ran awkward and limping, but running nonetheless, straight toward the Alpha King. Thaddeus's expression transformed in an instant. The cold, dangerous king vanished, replaced by a father who dropped to his knees as his missing son crashed into his arms. Andreas, Thaddeus breathed, his voice breaking on his son's name. My Andreas. You're alive. You're alive. The king, the terrifying, untouchable king, began to cry. Great, shuddering sobs that shook his massive frame as he clutched his youngest son, his hands running over Andreas's body as if confirming he was real. I thought you were dead, Thaddeus whispered. I thought I'd lost you like I lost your mother. I searched everywhere. Everywhere. My little one. My baby. I'm sorry, Papa, Andreas cried into his father's shoulder. I'm so sorry. I wanted to come home, but I was scared. Cronus tried to kill me. He said people wanted me gone. That I was the weak one. That no one would miss me. Thaddeus went very, very still. When he raised his head, his eyes held murder. Cronus, he repeated softly. My beta's brother. He did this. He killed the guards, Andreas nodded, his small body shaking. I heard them dying while I ran. He chased me. I fell. Broke my leg. I hid for so long, Papa. So long. Until they found me. Thaddeus's golden gaze shifted to Katharina and the twins, seeing them for the first time. Katharina felt that gaze like a physical touch, assessing, weighing, judging. She forced herself to remain standing, though her knees wanted to buckle. Forced herself to meet those terrible golden eyes. Who are you? Thaddeus asked, his voice deceptively quiet. Andreas twisted in his father's arms. Papa, this is Katharina. And these are my friends, Lysander and Talia. They saved my life. Fed me when I was starving. Healed me when I was broken. Hid me when I was scared. Please don't hurt them. Please. They're good. They're the best wolves I ever met. Something flickered in Thaddeus's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or calculation. He stood slowly, settling Andreas on his hip despite the boy's age, clearly unwilling to let him go. Approach, he commanded. Katharina stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of her children, protective even in the face of overwhelming power. "You're an Omega," Thaddeus observed. "Unmated. With young children. Living alone in the border territories." "Yes, my king." "And you found my son, when exactly?" "5 weeks ago, my king. My children discovered him in the forest, injured and alone. They fed him. I brought him to my cottage, treated his wounds, hid him in our root cellar because he feared the wolves who'd hurt him might return." 5 weeks. Thaddeus's voice dropped even lower. "You've had my son for 5 weeks and didn't report his presence." This was the moment. The precipice. "Yes, my king," Katharina said quietly. "Because your son begged us not to. Because he was terrified. Because he said he couldn't trust anyone. And because my children asked me to help him, and I couldn't tell them no." "You couldn't tell them no," Thaddeus repeated, his tone unreadable. "So you committed treason, hiding a royal prince, interfering with a king's search, because your 6-year-old children asked nicely?" "Yes," Katharina replied simply. "I did." The silence stretched like a blade. Then Thaddeus began to laugh, a sound so unexpected that Katharina actually flinched. "You're either the bravest Omega I've ever met," he said finally, "or the most foolish. I haven't decided which. Perhaps both, my king." His eyes sharpened. "You understand that I could execute you for this. That hiding a member of the royal family is punishable by death." "I do. And yet you brought him to me anyway. Voluntarily." "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do. And because I promised my children I'd teach them that right matters, even when it's dangerous." Thaddeus studied her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then he looked down at Andreas. "Is everything she said true? They helped you? Kept you safe?" "Yes, Papa. I'd be dead without them. Talia and Lysander shared their food when I was starving. Katharina healed my leg. They made me feel safe. For the first time since Mama died, I felt safe." Something cracked in Thaddeus's expression at the mention of his late mate. "Then I owe you a debt," he said to Katharina, his voice rough. "Name your reward. Money? Land? A position in my court? Name it and it's yours." Katharina took a breath. "Let my children visit Andreas. That's all. They've become friends. True friends. And friendships like that are rare and precious. Let them keep it." Thaddeus's eyebrows rose. "That's all? You could ask for a fortune and you want playdates? I want my children to be happy, my king. Andreas makes them happy. They make him happy. That's worth more than gold." For the first time, Thaddeus's harsh expression softened slightly. "You're a strange Omega, Katharina. So I've been told, my king." "Come," he commanded, turning toward the square. "All of you. We have much to discuss. Starting with everything Andreas can tell me about Cronus's betrayal." As they followed the Alpha King, Lysander slipped his hand into Katharina's. "We're not going to die," he whispered. "Not tonight," she whispered back. But as she watched Thaddeus carrying Andreas with the fierce protectiveness of a father reunited with his lost child, Katharina felt a different kind of danger stirring. The Alpha King was grateful now, but gratitude could turn to obsession, especially when it came to rare, brave, unusual Omegas who'd done the impossible. She'd saved his son. But who would save her from him? The interrogation lasted 3 hours. Thaddeus had commandeered the largest building in the settlement, a community hall that served as gathering space, market, and emergency shelter, and transformed it into a makeshift throne room. He sat in a chair that suddenly looked like a throne simply because he occupied it, Andreas curled in his lap despite being far too old for such coddling. The boy had fallen asleep an hour ago, exhausted by emotion and reunion, but Thaddeus refused to release him. Katharina stood before him, flanked by her twins, answering question after question with unwavering honesty. Where exactly had the children found Andreas? How severe were his injuries? What had he said about the attack? Who else knew of his presence? Every answer confirmed Andreas's story. Every detail painted Katharina not as a kidnapper but as a savior. And with each answer, Thaddeus's expression grew more complicated. Finally, as the night deepened toward dawn, he dismissed everyone except Katharina and the children. Erasmus, he called to his beta, who'd been standing guard by the door. Send word to the castle. I want Cronus arrested immediately. Use the silent protocol. I don't want him warned. And I want him alive. Very specifically alive. Yes, my king. Erasmus departed, his face grim. Alone now except for the sleeping Andreas and the watchful twins, Thaddeus studied Katharina with those unsettling golden eyes. Tell me about yourself, he said softly. And don't leave anything out. So she did. She told him about her original pack, the Nightshade Pack, ruled by an alpha who collected rare omegas like treasures. She told him about discovering her nature touch gift at 16. About the alpha's immediate obsession with claiming her, breeding her, using her gift for his own gain. She told him about running while she was pregnant, about the twins' father, a kind beta who died in the escape, buying her time with his life. She told him about 6 years of hiding, of moving from place to place, of finally settling in the border territories because they were the one place powerful alphas rarely looked. Thaddeus listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing. When she finished, silence filled the hall. Your nature touched, he finally said. That's exceptionally rare. Only one omega in 10,000 carries that gift. I'm aware, my king. Alpha Christos of Nightshade Pack is still searching for you. I've received requests from him over the years, inquiries about unmated omegas in my territories. I always declined to help. Didn't like the look in his eyes when he spoke of his lost treasure. Katharina's heart skipped. You know him? I know of him. Minor Alpha. Delusions of grandeur. If he knew you were under my protection, he'd never dare approach. I'm not under your protection, my king. Aren't you? Thaddeus tilted his head. You saved my son. That creates certain obligations. I want no obligations. I want only what I asked for permission for my children to visit Andreas. And if I want to give you more? Katharina's breath caught at the dangerous purr in his voice. I am not a reward to be claimed, she said carefully. I am a free omega. I choose my own path. Brave words, Thaddeus murmured. Foolish, but brave. Tell me, Katharina, what do you think happens to unmated omegas with rare gifts? Even here in the territories, you're not truly safe. Sooner or later, some alpha will scent what you are. Will try to claim you. Force a bond. I've managed 6 years. You've been lucky 6 years, he corrected. Luck runs out. He stood, carefully transferring the sleeping Andreas to a nearby bench and covering him with his own cloak. Then he approached Katharina with predator grace. She wanted to step back. Omega instinct screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to bare her throat. But she'd spent 6 years building herself into someone who didn't automatically submit. So she stood her ground. Thaddeus stopped mere inches away, close enough that she could feel his body heat, smell his scent, pine and smoke, and something wild and masculine that made her wolf whimper with confused arousal. I am going to make you an offer, he said softly. And I want you to truly consider it before answering. My king. Become my court omega. Not my mate, he clarified quickly. I'm not ready for that. May never be ready. But join my household. Bring your children. Live in the castle. Andreas clearly loves them. They'd be companions for him. Friends he can trust. You want me to uproot my entire life because your son made friends? Katharina asked incredulously. I want you protected, Thaddeus corrected. I want your gift nurtured instead of feared. I want those children raised with opportunities beyond mere survival. I want. He stopped, jaw clenching. What do you want, my king? I want to repay the debt I owe you, he said finally. You give me back my son. Let me give you a life worth living. It was a generous offer. impossibly generous. It was also a trap. Because Katharina understood what he wasn't saying, Court Omega was a position, yes, but it was also a claim. A public declaration that she belonged to his household, under his protection, within his power. She'd be trading one cage for another, more gilded, perhaps, but still confined. And if I refuse? Something dangerous flickered in Thaddeus's eyes. Then you return to your cottage. To your hand-to-mouth existence. To the constant fear that some alpha will discover what you are. To watching your children grow up with nothing. We have love. That's not nothing. Love doesn't fill empty bellies, Thaddeus said bluntly. Love doesn't protect against wolves who take what they want. Your children are 6 now. But in another 6 years, your daughter will be approaching her first heat. What happens then, when she's a beautiful young Omega in the territories with no pack protection? Katharina's blood ran cold because he was right. She'd been living day to day, focused on immediate survival, not thinking about the future bearing down on them. Talia would need protection when her Omega nature fully emerged. Lysander would need proper training to develop whatever dominance he might carry. And Katharina herself, she was 26. Young still. How much longer could she fend off unwanted attention? This is manipulation, she said quietly. This is reality, Thaddeus corrected. I'm offering you a choice. Come willingly as an honored member of my court. Or refuse and take your chances in a world designed to crush you. Some choice. More choice than most Omegas ever receive. He wasn't wrong about that either. Katharina glanced at her children, who'd been listening with wide, anxious eyes. Lysander's expression was thoughtful, already calculating angles and outcomes. Talia looked torn between fear and excitement. Can I think about it? Katharina asked. You have until dawn, Thaddeus replied. When the sun rises, I return to my kingdom. With or without you. Choose wisely. He returned to the bench where Andreas slept, settling beside his son with clear dismissal. Katharina gathered her children and retreated to a corner of the hall. What do we do, Mama? Talia whispered. I don't know, my love. The king is scary, Talia continued, but he loves Andreas. You can see it. And he was nice to us even though we hit his son. That counts for something, doesn't it? He's also used to getting what he wants, Lysander added quietly. And he wants us. You especially, Mama. Did you see how he looked at you? Katharina had seen. Had felt it like heat against her skin. The Alpha King was interested in her as more than just his son's savior. And that was perhaps the most dangerous complication of all. Dawn came too quickly. Katharina had spent the hours watching her sleeping children, weighing impossible choices, praying for guidance that didn't come. When pink light began filtering through the hall's windows, Thaddeus stirred, his golden eyes finding her immediately. Well, he asked simply. Katharina stood, her decision made though her heart remained uncertain. I have conditions, she said. Interest sparked in his gaze. Name them. My children are not servants. Not lesser. They're companions to Andreas, yes, but they receive the same education, the same opportunities, the same respect as any noble-born pup. Agreed. I am Court Omega, nothing more. I control my own body. My own choices. You don't command me to share your bed or bond with you or any other alpha in your court. Agreed. His voice remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. And if, at any time, I feel this arrangement has become a prison rather than protection, I can leave. With my children. No pursuit. No punishment. This time, Thaddeus hesitated. That one I cannot promise, he said finally. If you integrate into my household, my court, my kingdom, you'll know secrets. Have access to sensitive information. I can't allow you to simply walk away with that knowledge. Then we have no agreement. Wait. He stood, approaching her. I'll offer this instead. If you wish to leave, we negotiate terms. Safe passage to territory of your choosing. Financial support for you and the children. But you agreed to magical binding, a spell that prevents you from revealing court secrets. Fair. It was fairer than she'd expected. One more thing, Katharina added. Andreas told me about Cronus. About the betrayal. When you punish him, I want my children nowhere near it. I won't have them exposed to that darkness. Agreed. They're too young for that lesson. Katharina took a deep breath. Then yes, we'll come. Triumph blazed in Thaddeus's eyes, quickly controlled. You won't regret this. I already regret it, she replied honestly. But it's still the right choice.